Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining. Today, we are here to talk about choosing the right business school. And to introduce myself, my name is Nisha Trivedi, and I'm a senior consultant at mbaMission, a full service MBA admissions consulting firm. And I'm actually going into my 10th season at the firm. And so I've worked with a lot of different candidates on figuring out their target list. And so today, quickly, we'll go to finding the right type of MBA program for you. Then we'll talk a little bit about finding the right target schools. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, but you're free to contact me afterwards, if we get to the end. So first, I wanted to go through the types of MBA programs. So there is the full-time MBA, that's the column to the left. There's the part-time MBA, and there's the EMBA. So the full-time MBA, it might be what most of you are interested in. It's generally a 2-year program with some exceptions, but you're focusing on the program full-time with usually a summer internship in the middle. And you're not working during that duration, except for that internship. A part-time MBA program is for candidates who are working and studying at the same time. And you might be doing that for, let's say, about 2 to 4 years while you're on the job to upskill yourself, maybe to switch careers. And then to the right, there's the EMBA program. And typically that is for people with 10 or more years of work experience. I would say that the minimums for these programs is usually 6 years on the low end. Average tends to be about 10 to 15. And it's for people who are not looking to switch careers, but really get to the next leadership level in their current company and current career track. So first of all, those are the 3 general types of programs. And as you can see, there's differences in terms of stage of career, whether or not you're required to have management experience. That's where the EMBA is different, and how fixed the commitment is and the location of the program as well. So that's the first thing to decide, is which type of MBA program in general is right for you. Next, we'll talk about finding the right target schools. And it's important to consider the differentiators among programs. Sometimes what happens is that candidates get really caught up in, okay, where are these programs ranked? I only want to apply to programs in, let's say the top 10 or, something like that. And ranking is certainly a factor, but keep in mind that within your target list, there are a lot of other differences that can really influence your experience. So there's the length of the program, location, class structure, curriculum, the pedagogy, which is the teaching method, the academic specializations available, and the recruitment focus, right? You want to think about what job do you want after graduation, and can that school get you there? The size and location of the alumni base, the facilities, and then of course, the rankings and reputation. And we'll talk about a little these individually, but I also wanted to point you to our insiders guides. We have these available for a bunch of the top US and the top international programs, and they go in depth into these factors for each school. So please do check those out at shop.mbamission.com. And then the first differentiator is the length of the program. So as I mentioned earlier, for a full-time program in the US, it can be up to 2 years is most common. This is not necessarily the case though in a school that's outside the US. As you'll see, for the schools in Europe that I have listed here, the start dates are different, and then the length of the programs can be anywhere from 10 to 21 months. And some schools have different options that you can take. So really think about what's right for you. Do you want to be in the program for 2 years, or are you looking to conclude your experience as efficiently as possible? And then the second differentiator is location. You're going to be living at this program for 1 to 2 years, and you want to think about what type of environment is right for you. So if you're in an urban campus, it's going to be more decentralized. So for example, NYU Stern, there's not like really a central campus. There's a main building, but people are kind of going to live, wherever they can. It can be expensive, of course, living in a city versus, in a smaller town. But you might be closer to recruiters and be able to network easily with alumni who live in that target city, right? So people who go to school in New York, they might be able to take the subway to have an informational interview. And that can be really, really handy depending on what your career path is. Going to school in a college town, one hand, it's a little more intimate, right? People are a little closer together. They're living in the same areas. There's usually like one kind of central location. It's definitely less expensive. But at the same time, you have to make more of an effort to network, right? You might have to fly or take the train to the city that you want to work in post MBA in order to really make those recruiting connections. And so here are some examples in terms of the top US schools of urban campuses. So those are like in or very close to a city. Urban college hybrids. So these are more like college towns, but at the same time, they are near some major cities, right? So Berkeley Haas is in the college town of Berkeley, but Berkeley is a pretty decent town in of itself, and it's not very far from San Francisco. And then there are college towns, right? The right-hand column, and these are places that are definitely a little bit more isolated, right? The school is the main feature, and you kind of get that classic American college campus experience. And so some people really do prefer having that environment so that they're more focused. But it really depends on what you're looking for. And then for the schools outside of the US, urban campuses, London Business School, INSEAD Singapore, a couple of schools in Spain. IMD in Switzerland is a little bit more, removed from the city, but, not very far either. And then there's some campuses that are more, your college town. So same over there. And then another big thing to think about really is the class size and structure. And this can vary a lot among the schools. So some people might prefer a bigger class size. It is tough though when you have a big class of, let's say, more than 400 students. Are you going to get to know everybody? And the answer is no, probably not in the same way. Then there might be people, by the time of graduation who you haven't really met. But you'll have a bigger immediate network, a bigger alumni network. And then, it's, the thing is there's a little bit more anonymity with a smaller class. There's like no place to hide, but you're sort of among one of many if you're part of a bigger school. And then the word competitive is here because let's say at a big school, there might be a lot of people vying for that president of the finance club position, right, in the second year. So because there's just so many people, but there's still going to be few spots for certain recruiters, for certain leadership positions, there might be a lot of competition. On the other hand, a small class size, so let's say fewer than 400 students, you probably will get to know most people, if not all, in your class. And so things, you can form kind of closer bonds in some ways, right? That's a lot more intimate. You can form some really close partnerships with more people. In terms of leadership opportunities, volume-wise, there might be fewer people gunning for those positions that I mentioned earlier. And then the alumni networks, they might not be large in size, but they are very, very tight-knit. And so it's just a different way of looking at it. And then this chart is here to just show you the vast difference of size between the schools. Like Wharton, you've got over 900 candidates. This is for the class of 2022, by the way. And then all the way down to Tuck, less than 300. That is a huge, huge influence on your MBA experience. So really consider what class size is right for you. And then same for the non-US programs, class size, INSEAD, LBS being some of the bigger ones, IMD, and a few other schools being really small, under 100 people in cohort. So again, something to think about as well. And then what can also vary is within the class size, the structure. Some classes offer sections, within the class, and those are people you take the core classes with, and you get to know closely within the greater class. But schools vary in terms of how many people are in a section, how long are you sticking with that section, whether there are sections at all. As you can see, they're not in booth. And so think about, what works for you in that respect as well. And then same with the non-US programs, it varies in terms of your size of your section and how long you're sticking with them. So another thing to think about. And then another differentiator is the curriculum. Is it flexible or is it mandatory? So the flexible curriculum, schools, some examples are Booth, Sloan, and Stanford. You are able to take electives earlier on. So it's important for you to identify your academic needs, pretty early on. You want to be prepared from day one so that you can kind of figure out, okay, which classes do I want to take and when? Now that's great if there are certain classes that are a real priority for you. You'll be able to take your electives early, but at the same time, with different people taking different electives, it does limit the kind of shared experience you have, with your section or with your MBA class. Some schools have a mandatory curriculum. So you have, for the first semester, the first year, everybody has to take certain classes without exception. So in this case, the administration identifies academic needs. Students have to be patient. They can take their electives after they are done with the core requirements. But at the same time, you get to really bond with your class based on those classes that you're all taking together without exception, right? It leads to strong social bonds, studying for that accounting final together or whatever it is. And so that can be one advantage of a more mandatory, core curriculum. And so in terms of the core requirements, whether you can waive core courses based on past academic or professional experience, this varies a lot by the schools as well. So definitely something to really consider and dig into as you're researching your target schools. So you can see how much the percentages varied, right? For, these are all the top US schools. You can, for example, at Stanford, you can't waive the core courses, but they're just, 50% of the curriculum. But then, in terms of others, Tuck is a much bigger part of the curriculum, but you can waive courses as well. Harvard, you cannot waive the first year. Everybody takes the same first year together. No matter what. So that is, again, these are big differences in terms of what your experience will be like. And then outside the US, same deal, right? In terms of percentage of classes that are a required core, and can you waive the core? It seems to be even less common abroad. INSEAD, LBS, there is a possibility of waiving courses. The other schools, you cannot, no matter what your prior professional or academic experience was. And then differentiator number 5, the pedagogy. And so you might have heard of the case method of teaching, where you learn key business concepts through reading a case. A lot of times it's a Harvard Business School case. There's a business scenario with information and data, and you're supposed to put yourself in the shoes of an executive in order to decide which way the company should proceed. All schools use the case method to some extent, but some schools use it as their dominant method. Right. And so in that case, it's going to be a highly participatory curriculum. Again, you put yourself in the shoes of the decision makers. You work in teams on your case. So that's a lot of reading. The cases can be quite lengthy. And it's usually a lot of team-based work. Like you work with, let's say, people, teams of 6 or so in your class, and then you discuss a case and you come with your recommendation. Then there's the lecture-based curriculum. And this is something we're probably all familiar with, where, a professor stands up in front of the class, has slides, and explains the concepts, and you take notes, right? That requires more listening. But, it's flexible in the sense that there might be a class that's mostly lecture-based, but maybe it'll be interactive. The professor will ask questions of the class, or maybe one day, it'll be time to review a case, right? So it doesn't mean that every day, day in and day out, is going to be the same. A lecture, you take notes and then you leave, right? There's going to be some flexibility as well. And then, again, the schools vary a lot in terms of what percentage is case study, lecture, and then experiential learning is another big part of the MBA experience, and bigger at some programs than others. So for example, at Michigan Ross, my alma mater, it is a big part of the curriculum with MAP the first year. And so definitely consider what teaching method is right for you as you think about what schools are the best fit. And then outside the US, same thing. So you'll want to think about that as well. And then differentiator number 6, academic specializations and recruitment. I hear a lot when I'm talking to MBA candidates. I'll hear things like, "Oh, Booth, isn't that a finance school?" Or Kellogg, that's for people who want to do marketing and consulting. A lot of stereotypes. What I always urge people to do is get beyond those stereotypes. So Booth, Columbia, Stern, are they strong in finance? Yeah. But it does not mean they don't have other strengths, right? I've seen people from Booth go into tech and startups. Columbia can be, strong in marketing and social impact. Stern, definitely, strong in marketing, luxury goods. It goes on and on. Stern also has good connections with tech. And those are only a few examples of what they're good at beyond finance. Kellogg, a lot of people think, oh, Kellogg, that's a marketing school. Well, they have strong placement in consulting. They also have an excellent finance program. So several years ago, MBA Mission talked to somebody at the head of their admissions team, and they said, I wish people understood how good we were at finance. And actually, currently, they have a scholarship for people who are pursuing post-MBA finance careers. And I think a part of it is to really make sure they draw in that type of candidate because they know they have the resources for it. And then Haas and Yale, Yale gets especially stereotyped as like, oh, nonprofit, people going to nonprofit. But in reality, a really small percentage of the class goes into nonprofit immediately post MBA, right? I mean, most of the times those are long-term opportunities. So with Yale, especially, really strong in finance and consulting and other fields as well. And then with us, a lot of people also go into tech and marketing and all sorts of other things, finance on the West Coast. So there definitely are a lot of variations in strengths and opportunities across all these schools. And so the way to really go beyond some of these initial stereotypes is to really dig in and learn about your target program. Visit schools, to the extent that it's practical for you. Otherwise, virtual events are fine as well. They still have those. Talk to alumni and current students. I would say there's no substitute for that. That's when you get like the real inside scoop of what it's like to be a student somewhere. Our mbaMission blog has some good content on each of these schools. Sometimes we have interviews with admissions officers. That can be really insightful. That's when we learned about, Kellogg wanting to make its finance program known. Go to the student blogs of the schools themselves. They can give a good day in the life of a student at a school. And then, go to the admissions blogs, visit the school's websites. But those should just be a starting point for the research. Make sure you interact with the community and go to campus whenever you can. And then, so just to kind of drive home that point from before, Kellogg stereotyped as a marketing school. And wonderful marketing opportunities across industries, but also really strong in consulting. Like I said, strong in finance, and they wish more people do that. Really good for real estate, and then excellent for nonprofit. It's when I hear somebody, who's a top candidate who's interested in social impact at some point, Kellogg is one of the first schools that comes to mind. Wharton, stereotyped as a finance school. But, it has strengths in finance, but also in marketing, which is something that surprises people sometimes. So I actually went to the University of Pennsylvania undergrad, and I took marketing classes at Wharton as part of my, major curriculum. And that's when I realized that a lot of the marketing research studies that really gave rise to the practices that we use today originated at Wharton. Right? So that's just an example of a strength that it might not be known for at top of mind. Really strong in healthcare. It actually has a prestigious and competitive healthcare management program, and strength in international business, which it has through the Lauder program. And then differentiator number 7 is the alumni base, right? Think about, where are the alumni based? Are they clustered around a certain region, or is there like a broad base, are enough of them based abroad, if that's important to you? Think about the number of alumni versus the tight-knit nature of the alumni group, right? And then think about, what resources do the alumni group have? Do they have clubs in different areas? Do they have events where you can network with alumni long after you graduate? So if those things are important to you, think about what school has to offer in each of these areas. And so in terms of the alumni base, it can vary a lot, right? Like, so for example, Stern, huge alumni base, same as Wharton, same with Harvard. And that sort of, you can see it kind of correlates with how big the class size is in the first place, right? Bigger classes, more alum. Whereas with Tuck, smallest alumni base in number, but what I've heard about the Tuck network is it's incredibly tight-knit. Like the thing I've heard is that, a Tuck student or alum emails another alum and they get a response in like 15 minutes. Like that, it's that tight-knit. And so that can have its own advantage. So really think about what's more important to you. And then with the non-US schools, same, IMD, strong alumni base, whereas, with Cambridge might be, smaller and more tight-knit. And so definitely, again, something to think about no matter where you're looking to go to business school. And then facilities, right? I definitely, I heard a candidate say the other day, like, oh, some of these schools are so beautiful. And I didn't think that was important to me. But once I visited campus, I realized just how much I like the building. And I think that's because, to this first point, the architecture and environment can affect your learning experience. Some schools have, pretty extreme amenities, right? They have like these new fancy residences. They might have team study rooms, lead designs like they did at my alma mater, Michigan Ross. Golf courses, gyms, ski slopes, they might even have those depending on where the school is. And then, you can see a rundown of some of the schools that had the most latest updates. And who knows, what's coming in the future, right? But these are some examples of schools that have had relatively recent renovations. So certainly in the last 10 years. And so that's something to think about, is the newness of the school and the amenities important to you. And then finally, we get to the factor that sometimes people put too much at the top, but it is still important, right? Rankings and reputation. It is, while it's a factor to consider, you want to make sure to know that it's not a perfect measure, right? So for example, this question, why aren't you living in Iceland? It has to do with, the fact that Iceland sometimes is number one on quality of life or happiness index, right? In the world. So you might think, a lot of people would be like, great, I'm moving to Iceland. But the thing is, it might not be right for everybody. It's cold, it's a bit isolated. If you have an industry you want to work with that's not really prominent there, that could be tough, right, to make a living. So, just because it's number one on some list doesn't mean it's right for you. And I think that very same wisdom applies to MBA rankings. And the second point is that rankings come and go. I've seen schools that were number 7 one year, number 11 one year, number 6 one year, number 9. There's a lot of variation. That's only among the top 10, right? And so because of the variation and because of the fact that you want to find the school that's right for you, think of rankings as a starting point, but not as your end point. And in terms of the rankings, I would say some of the reputable ones, although these can vary so much among themselves, is Bloomberg, US News and World Report, Financial Times, and The Economist. And you can see, and these are from a few years ago, by the way, they have changed since then, but you can see how much the rankings even vary among these lists, like US News and World Report and Bloomberg have different rankings, from 1 to 10. You'll see the same, and then as well as from 11 to 20. So you'll see some variation there. And then Financial Times has its own ranking, and then The Economist, has its own ranking, and you'll see so many big differences that, it's hard to reconcile. But again, you want to think of it as a starting point and really think about what schools are ultimately right for you based on all the other factors that we talked about. And these are the schools based abroad. And again, these rankings are just illustrative. They are a couple of years old. New ones came out for some of these sources recently, but just know here that there can be just a lot of variation from year to year, from ranking source to ranking source. And, the thing is, when you look at these programs individually, right, here's two that are perennially in the top 10, Chicago Booth, Dartmouth Tuck. They could not be more different, right? So the rankings are similar-ish, right? They've both been in the top 5 even. But when you dig into their differences, Booth, Chicago, big city, third biggest in the US. Tuck is in Hanover. It's a really small college town, and it's really isolated. Some people love it, but it's not for everyone. The Booth class is twice as big as Tuck's. The curriculum is different. Booth is flexible, Tuck's more rigid. And so those are two big differences. Recruiting specializations, they're stereotyped for different things, but they're also genuinely strong in several different things. The alumni size is different, but maybe some people might think Tuck is more tight-knit. And then, the Booth, facility is really nice, but haven't been renovated super recently, whereas Tuck a little bit more so, but you never know what the future holds. But that's just a way of kind of digging in and saying, okay, rankings might be similar, but boy, your MBA experience would be so different. And so with that, I'll answer, or I'll just tell you a little bit about mbaMission, and then I think we might have a few minutes for questions. And so, these are just some things about mbaMission. We are, like I said, a full service MBA admissions consulting firm, and we were named number 1 by Poets and Quants several years in a row. And, one of the big things I'll point out here is that my colleagues and I all do this full time. So, day in and day out, we are working with clients. We're talking amongst ourselves to exchange best practices, and so you really get the support of dedicated consultants when you work with us on your applications. And then we also offer On Track. It just launched last year, and it's gotten rave reviews. It's a on-demand MBA platform that takes you through modules that cover literally every part of the application process you can think of. And my colleagues and I contributed to the platform. We're really excited about how much it's helping candidates, and people who work with us on a school package basis actually get this as a 12-month complimentary subscription that will accompany them on their very customized work together with their consultant. And yes, so we right now are running or actually, you know what? I think we have a new coupon code now. So if you would like to sign up for On Track early, definitely you can visit On Track, the social media channels, and you'll get the latest coupon code. Alternatively, you can contact info@mbaMission.com, and they will be happy to let you know if there's any On Track specific promotions going on. And with that, I think we might have at least a couple of minutes for questions. So yeah, happy to answer anything that's on your mind. And I think I see some stuff in the chat.
Nisha, thank you very much for this session. I think we have enough time to answer, let's say, 3 questions. So I'm going to project it for your convenience. And yeah,
Great.
Go to questions.
Let's see. We have a specific question about IESE. If your intended post-MBA industry is oil and gas. Yeah, that's a good question. I think what I would say is that for any business school, you really want to dig in and see what are the post-MBA opportunities, right? Where do you want to work post-MBA in terms of company and in terms of geography? So what I would do is dig into the employment report of that school and say, okay, have people gone into oil and gas? What have been the roles they've recruited for? Are those a fit for me? And I would do that for any schools that you're looking for. But that is going to be a really important consideration when you think about what MBA program makes the most sense for you. Let's see. And then there's a question on tips and overview for Canadian MBA schools. Yes, and by the way, on mbaMission.com, we also have insiders guides on the Canadian schools as well. Most commonly, I think we work on Rotman and Ivy. I know, especially I've worked with candidates on Rotman, and they really enjoy it as a program that has just really strong strengths in general management and global recognition. And so I think that's a really strong program. There's Ivy, which is a 1-year program, and so you also want to think about that question we went back to about 1 year versus 2 year. One thing is, if you do have questions that are specific to your interests in your profile, I definitely encourage you to sign up for a free consultation. When you go to mbaMission.com, you'll see a link to sign up for a free consultation, and then it'll take you to a form that asks for the current version of your resume, the schools that you're targeting, your career goals, that sort of basic information, and then we can talk about your profile and what schools make sense for you, and geographically which ones make sense for you. And then there's a question about MBA school for studying core finance. I mean, there are a ton of schools that are strong in finance, right? In terms of the top US schools, the ones that are known for, stereotypically for being good at finance are, Wharton, Booth, NYU Stern, Columbia. I mean, those are only 4. There are so many. So I think it depends on what kind of finance career you're looking for. Is it investment banking? Is it private equity? Is it asset management? What's the geography you're targeting post-MBA? What's your pre-MBA experience? Those things are all really important when you consider a school. And in that I actually only mentioned US schools, right? I mean, there's Rotman in Toronto. LBS is in London is really strong for finance as well. And then there's going to be schools outside of that range that have good placement in finance. So again, it really depends on your experience, what you're looking to go into post MBA, and where you're looking to live.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your responses. Unfortunately, we are out of our time, so thanks for this session, and thanks everyone for joining. And I hope these sessions are very helpful to you, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining, and definitely get in touch if there's anything that MBA Mission can do for you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.